Transportation Director for the West Shore Educational Service District.
Sergeant Dan Thomas with the Michigan State Police Heart Post.
Welcome to Proactive Response Training for School Bus Drivers. This program was designed specifically for school bus drivers as a collaborative effort that started in Mason County.
As Trina mentioned, this effort began in Mason County with Mason County Sheriff's Department, local law enforcement, emergency management, and Michigan State Police being involved in it. It now has grown to the point where it's a statewide initiative to bring school bus safety to the forefront.
These documents represent information of a general nature and are intended only to provide a general understanding of school bus safety. West Shore Educational Service District cannot and does not guarantee the elimination of every risk for injury on or related to a school bus. Any action taken based upon this information is strictly at your own risk. Except as otherwise noted, these documents may not be reproduced or redistributed in whole or in part without the express permission of the West Shore Educational Service District. What we are trying to do is just give you guys a sample of what worked for Mason County. And just because it works for Mason County doesn't mean that it'll work in your school district. So we strongly suggest that you go back to your school districts and get with your supervisors and board members to ensure that this will be allowed in your schools. During this training, you guys may see some things that are disturbing, that you don't like, and they're fairly sensitive. But we ask that you guys sit through these, and if you guys really are concerned or have any issues, please make sure that you talk to your trainer.
So this here is don't approach life's challenges by being reactive, be proactive. The idea behind this is we want to be a proactive response to an assailant, just like we would in our schools. We want that same response to be on our school buses as well. We want to be proactive rather than reactive. It makes for a better outcome for all of us. One of those fatalities is too many. So that's the idea behind this program, is to try to reduce the fatalities, school shootings, violence that occurs in the schools, as well as what is coming onto our bus system. So the question is your school prepared? And as well as, have you been taking that training that your schools have been doing and bringing it into the transportation section, that being on your school buses?
So this video that you are about to see is Nicholas Cruz, and he was the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooter. What we want you guys to see is he talks about how he got to the school and how he was getting to the school. What would you do if instead of taking an Uber that he went on a school bus? How would you guys react to this?
Hello, my name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people. With an AR-15 and a couple tracer rounds, I think I can do a good done. Location is Stoneman Douglas in Parkland, Florida. It's going to be a big event. And when you see me on the news, you'll all know who I am. You're all going to die. Pew, 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 pew. Yeah. Can't wait.
So violence is a reality. With the study has been done, 98% of the time it's usually a single attacker in these occurrences that go on. Roughly about 40% of these incidents occur where the actual assailant themselves commits suicide. But if you look at the statistic here, with 46% of those actually have ended with some sort of applied force. That applied force not necessarily is from law enforcement, that applied force could be from citizens, civilians, bus drivers, school teachers, etc. So you see where it's indicated above here, the average response for law enforcement in an active assailant incident is about 3 to 5 minutes. National study has varied sometimes from 3 to 5 to 5 to 6 minutes. However, that is based on geographical location of the school and also the officers that are responding. If you happen to have an SRO that's in your school, that response time will be much shorter. You possibly could be within a minute's response time if you have an SRO in the school. However, if you are out in the rural areas of some of our Michigan locations we have where our schools are at, that response time could be anywhere from 15, 20, 30 minutes possibly. So my question would be is for the trainers that are assisting with this program is, how does your area look geographically? What would be your response time? And that response time there should be shared with your audience as well, and explaining as to what the dynamics of that would be, where those resources would be coming from your local law enforcement and state agencies. So the question is for the trainer as well as the class is what is currently being done now in your school system, and take time right now and discuss with your class you have to see what kind of plans or implementations have already been put forth in those schools. Discuss that and see if any of those have been brought over to the bus transportation system as well. Here will be some examples of is there currently a shelter in place, evacuation drills, do they do lockdown drills? Discuss those with your audience and discuss them amongst yourselves as well, is to find out what is being taught and maybe what is not. This way, if there is something that needs to be maybe pushed out to other areas that are not having this plan, there can be a plan that can be developed. The question for the trainers as well here is, do you have your emergency managers in the room right now? Is there a plan in place for the school and what to do? And does that plan include the transportation section of that, meaning the school buses? If there is, please at this time take time to discuss that with your emergency managers in the room, your emergency operations plan within your schools, and also your audience you currently have. As we talked about before, proactive versus reactive, where are we better off for success? We are better off being a proactive response than a reactive response. A proactive response is much quicker for us. A reactive response, unfortunately, is a little slower, and we have to catch up at that point in time. So we want to make sure we move to a more proactive response, and we'll go into further detail here with that. So one of the things you want to look at with a proactive response is look how the human body reacts. If everyone's heard of fight, flight, freeze, those are the three things that will happen to the body under high stress. Flight is just that. Flight is getting away from the danger, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's safety. That's getting yourself away from the current dangers going on. Fighting is the last resort. We're not looking for people to engage in a fight, but if that fight has come close to you and it's inside your grasp, at that point in time, flight is not going to be the best option for you because you're not going to have a safe avenue to escape and get away. Freezing is what we don't want to do, and I use the analogy of kind of the deer in the headlight look. If you freeze, you are just sitting there flat-footed, and there's so much time being wasted where you could be doing something more proactive, which is either taking the fight to the assailant or at that point making some alternate route to flight, barricade, or avoid that situation. So some of the traditional reactive responses have been, going back from Columbine and other instances as well, is the responses back then were we would put students in hiding or put them low on the ground or put them down in an area where really they're more vulnerable. They weren't able to get up and move freely. They weren't quick on their feet. And that's where we want to change that mindset. We want to change that thought from going to let's shelter in place, put people down, and not give them an avenue to escape or to defend themselves. So by going more towards a proactive response, we are keeping people more apt to make that judgment call as to what's best for them at that point in time, whether it's to fight that assailant, barricade, stop that assailant from coming into their area, or to try to escape the area itself, and which would go back to the flight. So as we talk about proactive response, there's several formats that are being currently used throughout our schools in Michigan. Just to name a few, CRAZE, Civilian Response to Active Shooter Events, ALICE, Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate, Run, Hide, Fight, Strategos, Avoid, Deny, Defend, just to name a few that are being used out there. All those concepts and formats that are being used out there are on a proactive baseline with that. They are all proactive rather than reactive to that threat.
Here is a response from where proactive work. This is where a school district got word that something was going on and they went and barricaded and locked down, where something like this could have been very deadly and a whole lot of people could have been hurt or killed. They were able, because they took a proactive response, to stop this from happening. Is the school bus an extension of the classroom?
I would say yes, it is. And you look at the amount of students that are traveling on our roadways on a daily basis in school bus. That is the most precious cargo that is currently going down our roads throughout the state of Michigan. And we need to make sure that we're keeping that most precious cargo we have, being our children, safe at all times. So is that proactive response being taken to the school bus level? And that's the question we need to ask in our classroom, and ask the trainers to ask that as well. Are we teaching our school bus drivers the proper measures and techniques they need to keep, again, that most precious cargo we have safe?
Is this training necessary on a school bus? Each day in the state of Michigan, we have 700,000 kids that travel over 900,000 miles on 15,000 school buses just in the state of Michigan alone. This training is very important to make sure, like Sergeant Thomas said, that this gets down to the school bus. driver to protect our kids.
Okay, so we all hear when there's an act of violence that occurs inside our school, but have you seen or heard of some of these incidents that have taken place on our school buses?
So in Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, instances have happened on the school buses, but you just unfortunately don't hear about all of them in the news. Trainers, please take a moment and talk to your audience and see if there has been anything in your area that has gone on. Here is an example of what happened in Alabama that was reactive. It was a bus driver who had a child stolen off of the bus, and then the bus driver was ultimately killed. What proactive response measures could have been taken to have helped prevent this from happening?
It's 3:31 p.m. on a winter day in the tiny town of Midland City, Alabama. Population 2,300. Kids are coming home from school. A bus is taking the same dirt road it always does, past cotton fields and mobile homes. But today, unbeknownst to anyone on board, they are being stalked. Suddenly, a man carrying a gun stops the bus, loaded with children, and makes an unthinkable demand.
I need 2 boys on this bus.
But this is not just any man. This is Jimmy Lee Dykes, a man with a simmering grudge with a list of grievances against the U.S. government.
6, 8, here go. Now, I mean, right now. Right now.
In this exclusive audio recorded by the bus security system, you hear the 65-year-old Dykes threatening to kidnap 2 of the 21 children on that bus.
2 kids, 6, 8 years old. Get it. Get it. Make a move, I'll shoot you.
For almost 5 minutes, bus driver Chuck Poland resists the man that up until now he thought was his friend.
Can't do it. Do it!
Sorry. You're gonna have to shoot me.
I thought I'd shoot a kid. Please, do it.
No.
Do it. Do it. I don't kill you.
It's my responsibility.
I can't help that.
Kids on
That's
the
it. I
bus.
can't help the
I
road.
can't turn them over to somebody else.
Unrelenting, Dykes turns his attention to the children, now paralyzed with fear.
Come here, kid. The 2 in the back seat. You, the girl, and that boy right there. Come here.
Dykes turns his attention to a little boy named Ethan, just 5 years old. Ethan has autism and always wants to sit behind his favorite driver. Poland pleads not Ethan and tries to save the boy, even with a gun staring in his face. In the back of the bus, 15-year-old Trey Watts pushes back his fear and calls 911.
Tell me what the guy with the gun's doing again. He's asking for kids. He's asking for kids? Yes, ma'am. He's aiming the gun at the bus driver? Yes, ma'am.
When driver Chuck Poland heroically refuses to hand over Ethan and the other children, Dykes shoots him 5 times in full view of the horrified kids.
Oh my gosh, what's going on? The bus driver's there. Oh my gosh, hang in there, baby, hang in there. Just get down, get down. What's he doing now, honey? He took a kid. He took a kid. Is the bus driver still on the bus? Yes, he's dead.
Just had a bus driver shot, possibly deceased.
Dykes leaves behind a note on the bus and drags Ethan to a nearby underground bunker, one he's been building in his backyard for months. And he wants a hostage for one reason and one reason only, to help him deliver a warped anti-government message. And he's prepared. The bunker is constructed to hold a hostage and fortified to withstand an assault by police.
So in this video here, you'll see an instance where a young lady on a bus produces a firearm and begins to threaten the students on the bus. This incident begins more of a reactive response, but it turns into a proactive response from another student on there. I believe was actually a high school football player who at that point in time realized that the threat that he was dealt with and took a proactive response and ended up tackling the young lady and disarming her.
Thank you, David. We have the video of a 14-year-old girl aiming a gun at students on our Yazoo County school bus. Deputies say the girl pulled a gun and threatened other students. Now, we're going to show you that video, but first we want to let you know exactly what you'll see. In the video, you'll see a girl pull out a gun, load the gun, and then wave it at other students on the bus. Now, there is some confusion as some kids don't know if it's real or not. In the end, a star football player tackles her and grabs the gun. Now, the faces you're about to see are blurred out to protect the identity of the students. Now, here is that video.
So in this video, you will see a student brought a gun on a bus. What else could have been done? What could the bus driver have done? What could the other kids have done on this bus to have helped this incident? So are you convinced yet that this actually does happen on school buses? So how can we train our drivers to ensure that they are prepared to keep our kids safe? Now we're going to show you some proactive responses that you can do on your school buses. You can avoid the situation, get out of there, be away from that spot. Relay, what does your dispatch need to know? What information does law enforcement need to know? You can secure the bus. Our buses are always safest when they're moving, but if that option is not available, how can you secure your bus so nobody can enter your bus? And last, engage if you absolutely have to. Your driver's aides and students can help protect themselves. So avoid. How can you avoid a situation? Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of students as they are approaching. Are they walking different? Do they have a big coat on and it's really hot outside? Be aware of other parents that are out and about that maybe aren't there. What is out of the ordinary that shouldn't be there? Make sure that those are the things that you guys are paying attention to, and also sending back into dispatch if something is wrong. Have an escape plan. Always have a way to get out. Don't park up so close to the vehicle in front of you that you have no way to get out of there. Always try and make sure that you can leave that situation if necessary. Or if you can't, drive through it. Our buses are big. If you need to continue to move on, then move on, even if that means hitting a vehicle.
So part of the avoid segment of this as well is to be aware of the body language of individuals that you see or encounter, whether they be on your bus or off your bus. Look at how they're dressed. Look at how their body is moving. Does it move and flow naturally like yours would? The question would be is, Are they concealing something underneath their clothing? Are they having a large bulge on the side of their clothing? Are they continually touching a particular area on themselves? A lot of times that's an indicator there's something there they're trying to conceal. So think about how your day-to-day movements would be and how natural flowing they are. And when you see someone who's not doing that, that should raise your suspicion. Relay. This comes back to the drivers relaying the information, which is key not only for the transportation section back at the bus garage, but also for law enforcement. And the information that we get sometimes is not always accurate when it comes through to us. So having as much detailed information as you possibly can. Male, female, what race, how are they dressed, what are they holding, were they in a car, were they driving, those kind of things, tattoos, all those things that help us when we are responding to an event like that. So the more detail you can provide back to the 911 dispatch center or to the bus garage, it helps our response and it helps us formulate a plan on how we're going to deal with that response. So during a situation when you're relaying information, is communicate with your students on a bus. We live in a cell phone era now with that, and there's going to be multiple phones dialing 911. Communication is key with that. Talking to your students on a bus, making sure that you have the proper location, communicating that with your students as well. For instance, if maybe you are dealt with something and you cannot get that information out, one of your students there very well likely will be able to get that information out through the 911 center for us.
When do you need to secure the bus? The assailant has walked you in. Maybe you cannot go forward, you cannot move. Maybe when students cannot exit on their own if they were special needs or if they were preschool. Maybe it's when you're in lineup loading kids at the end of the day, when we're all tight so kids cannot go in between our buses. So how do you secure a bus? Well, obviously you got to shut all the doors. We need to make sure that the doors are shut, and if you can, use a strap to go ahead and ensure that those doors cannot be opened from the outside. Put backpacks to aid against the side of the bus so that you can shield the kids from anything that might happen coming in.
So here's some examples of how to lock down a bus, and some of these examples you're going to see in these slides here are what's currently being used in our particular area. This may not be or may not apply to your area, but look on your bus and see what kind of mechanisms you have or what kind of equipment you have that would allow you to secure that bus. So we want to train our drivers to engage in the fact if there is an emergency on the bus and how they're going to deal with it. We want to train drivers to make the best possible decision that they have for their bus. And that may differ from driver to driver, bus to bus, district to district. What works on one bus may not necessarily work in the other bus. And I use that example as such as, what is your student body like? Do you have a bus of special needs children that are on a bus or that have mobility issues? Your response to how you would respond to an emergency may be different than if you had your wrestling team or your football team players on that bus. So the people you have on a bus, the students you have on a bus, are going to determine what your response possibly is going to be and how you're going to react to that. Also with the engage is having this discussion with the students that are on your bus. You know your students better than anyone there, probably better than most of the teachers in the classrooms do, because you have them there, you're hearing them when they are not so tense inside a school setting. They're more on a bus, more relaxed, more apt to talk about things. So you will probably hear and understand your students more than maybe the teachers in the classroom will. You will know that the students you have on your bus that would be willing to step up and help you in case of emergency. The person you could rely on to make that phone call, or you know that person that would be available to follow direction when you tell them to start barricading the door with backpacks, that kind of stuff. So you know your student body. Have those discussions with the students on your bus, and just get to know your students the best.
Okay, so this is the part where we're going to get into the practical part of the training. So what we want to go over is we really want to stress the safety directions and that everybody listen and abide by the rules for the safety.
So for the instructors, trainers here, you know, safety is paramount with this. Is we want to make sure we're taking this serious with our class and as well as the safety precautions we need to take. With that being said, obviously we don't want to have any of our individuals in our classroom having pens or knives, that kind of stuff, keychains, and I would ask that you take all those items and secure it someplace for them, have them go back to their vehicles, lock it up, whatever. Because under stress and under stress-induced training, sometimes those things can come out, and I have been a recipient of some of those and some of the trainings we've done where someone wouldn't think about doing it because they're in a training situation, but they kind of get caught up in a moment. And the last thing we want to do is have anyone get injured or hurt during this. It's not the idea behind this training. Another thing I want to really strongly suggest is have a discussion with your class as to what has been their life experiences with things. Have they been put into a high stress situation or a deadly situation before? For instance, I've had individuals in my classrooms that have been held up at gunpoint and robbed. The last thing I'd want to do is to rekindle a bad memory or bring them back to an experience that they have once had. If you have individuals like that in your classroom, I would suggest that you bring them to the side, have a discussion, let them decide whether or not they feel like they can participate. If they cannot, I would have them alongside you and have them still visually watching the training, but just not taking part in some of that training. With the safety protocol, please voice this with your class and with the drivers as well, is everyone in that class has the authority to call safety at any given time. Meaning such as if you are proctoring that particular bus, you are maybe focused on one area of the bus and all of a sudden maybe something happens in the rear of the bus, someone falls, hits their head. We want anybody in that bus to be able to stop that scenario, press pause basically on it, address this safety concern, and we can restart that scenario over and over. So we want to empower everyone that's involved in this training so that they can stop that training at any given time.
We ask that there is no horseplay during the training. Train the way you fight, because then you'll fight the way that you train. We ask that you take this seriously so that way you guys can learn something and be able to keep our kids safe as they're riding our buses.